Zenith Station existed as a monument to the galaxy's collective obsession with making simple tasks impossibly complicated. Suspended in the gravitational sweet spot between three binary star systems, it served as the premier customs facility for interspecies commerce, a gleaming testament to bureaucratic evolution that had taken roughly 5,000 years to achieve its current state of magnificent inefficiency. The station resembled what might happen if a geometric theorem had too much to drink and decided to reproduce. Hexagonal modules connected to dodecahedral sections, which in turn linked to structures that existed in dimensions most species couldn't pronounce. Its architects, the Symmetrians, believed that true civilization could only be achieved through perfect mathematical harmony, though they'd somehow overlooked the fact that their masterpiece made navigating to the bathroom a 3-hour expedition requiring advanced calculus. Within its crystalline corridors, representatives from 892 species gathered daily to engage in the sacred ritual of hierarchical assessment protocol. This delightful system ranked every civilization on a scale from barely sentient moss to transcendently enlightened beings who probably smell like vanilla. The rankings determined everything from shipping priorities to the quality of complimentary beverages offered in waiting areas. Humans, being relative newcomers to the galactic community, currently occupied the prestigious rank of promising but primitive bipeds with anger management issues. This classification entitled them to basic courtesy, medium-grade atmospheric mixtures, and the sort of patronizing smiles usually reserved for particularly dim house pets who'd learned to use door handles. Freight Coordinator Vera Blackwood had spent 3 years navigating this labyrinth of diplomatic niceties, though she approached the task with all the enthusiasm of someone performing dental surgery on herself. Her office occupied a modest section of Module 7' Delta probably, where she processed cargo manifests, shipping authorizations, and the occasional existential crisis brought on by trying to explain human coffee culture to beings who considered photosynthesis a fine dining experience. The morning that would later be remembered as the Great Furniture Reorganization Incident began with what appeared to be routine bureaucratic torture. Vera sat behind her standard-issue polymer desk, reviewing manifests for the weekly Earth Proxima shipping run, when her communication array began emitting the sort of urgent pinging that suggested either imminent disaster or someone had discovered new ways to complicate her existence. Coordinator Blackwood announced the station's central AI in a voice that managed to sound both infinitely patient and deeply condescending. Please report to Customs Inspection Bay 12 Theta for immediate consultation regarding irregularities in your manifest filing. Vera stared at her reflection in the dark monitor screen, noting the way her brown hair had developed stress-induced cowlicks, and her green eyes held the hollow look of someone who'd spent too many years explaining why humans needed caffeine to function. Irregularities, she muttered, gathering her datapads with the resigned efficiency of someone heading to their own execution. Of course there are irregularities. Customs Inspection Bay 12 Theta existed as a shrine to the art of making commerce as difficult as possible. Banks of scanning equipment lined the walls, their sensors capable of detecting molecular contamination, dimensional instabilities, and what the Symmetrians called aesthetic discordance. In the center of the bay stood a ceremonial inspection table carved from a single piece of Andromedan crystal, its surface designed to display holographic readouts of whatever cargo was currently being subjected to bureaucratic scrutiny. Behind this monument to administrative excess stood Senior Customs Inspector Thorvak-Ness of the Vorthan Collective, a being who embodied everything that made interspecies relations feel like voluntary torture. The Vorthans had achieved faster-than-light travel, while humans were still figuring out agriculture, and they'd never let anyone forget it. Thorvak-Ness stood 8 feet tall on 6 legs, his chitinous carapace gleaming with the sort of polish that suggested professional vanity, while his forearms gestured in patterns that conveyed either deep philosophical meaning or really aggressive sign language. "Ah, Coordinator Blackwood," he announced in the sort of voice that could make compliments sound like insults. "How delightfully punctual. Though I suppose punctuality is one of the few virtues your species has managed to develop during your brief flirtation with civilization." Vera approached the inspection table with the careful steps of someone walking through a minefield. 3 years of diplomatic training had taught her to recognize the warning signs of impending bureaucratic disaster, and Thorvak-Ness was currently displaying enough red flags to redecorate a communist rally. "Inspector," she replied with professional neutrality, "I understand there are questions about my shipping manifest." "Questions?" Thorvak-Ness's mandibles clicked in what passed for amused condescension among his kind. "Oh, my dear primitive coordinator, we are far beyond mere questions. We have entered the realm of serious regulatory violations that threaten the very fabric of interstellar commerce." The inspection bay's environmental systems hummed quietly, maintaining perfect atmospheric conditions for all species present. Automated scanners continued their endless cycles, analyzing air quality, gravitational fluctuations, and the molecular composition of everyone's breakfast. Everything was controlled, measured, civilized. "Let us examine," Thorvak-Ness continued, activating the crystal table's holographic display, "the curious case of container designation OUT-77 Alpha." The air above the table shimmered, revealing a three-dimensional image of a standard shipping container. "According to your manifest, this vessel contains processed plant matter for consumption. However, our deep skin analysis has revealed something far more sinister." Vera looked at the hologram with the expression of someone whose day had just taken a sharp turn toward the ridiculous. "Sinister. Indeed." The Vorthan Inspector's voice dropped to the sort of dramatic whisper usually reserved for announcing the discovery of ancient curses. "Our sensors have detected the presence of unauthorized biological specimens within your so-called processed plant matter." Biological specimens. Precisely. Living organisms that pose a potential threat to station security, interspecies health protocols, and the delicate ecological balance that we have spent millennia perfecting. Thorvak-Ness gestured grandly with all four arms, his carapace catching the bay's artificial lighting in patterns that suggested either deep significance or a really expensive paint job. Vera stared at the holographic container for several seconds, her expression cycling through confusion, realization, and the sort of dangerous calm that experienced diplomats learn to feign. "Inspector Thorvak-Ness," she said carefully, "are you referring to coffee beans?" "Coffee." The Vorthan's compound eyes focused on her with the intensity of someone discovering a new form of heresy. "You mean to tell me that these biological contaminants are intended for consumption?" "They are not contaminants. They are coffee beans. Roasted, processed, completely harmless coffee beans that humans have been drinking for thousands of years." What followed was 20 minutes of the most exquisitely detailed explanation of human caffeine consumption habits that had ever been delivered in a customs inspection bay. Vera described the cultivation, processing, and preparation of coffee with the patience of someone teaching quantum physics to houseplants, while Thorvak-Ness listened with the expression of someone discovering that their neighbors were secretly cannibals. "Let me understand this correctly," he said when she'd finished, his voice carrying the sort of horror usually reserved for discussing war crimes. "Your species deliberately consumes the processed reproductive organs of alien plant life as a recreational stimulant." "When you put it like that, it sounds weird." "Weird." Thorvak-Ness's mandibles began clicking rapidly, a sound that suggested either extreme agitation or an approaching nervous breakdown. "This is beyond weird. This is barbaric. This is exactly the sort of primitive behavior that demonstrates why humanity requires constant supervision from more evolved civilizations." The inspection bay had grown noticeably quieter, as if the automated systems were holding their breath in anticipation of whatever was about to happen. Through the panoramic windows, Zenith Station's artificial environment continued its careful simulation of paradise, complete with synchronized weather patterns and gravity-defying water features. "Supervisor," Vera said, her tone carrying the dangerous quiet that preceded either diplomatic breakthroughs or complete relationship breakdowns, "coffee is a perfectly normal beverage consumed by billions of humans across the galaxy. It's not barbaric, it's not primitive, and it's certainly not a threat to anyone." "Normal." Thorvak-Ness rose to his full height, towering over the human female like a monument to evolutionary superiority. "Your definition of normal includes consuming alien reproductive matter for neurochemical alteration. This is precisely why the Vorthan Collective questions humanity's fitness for unsupervised interstellar commerce." "Unsupervised commerce." "Indeed. Your species lacks the mental sophistication necessary for true galactic citizenship. You require guidance, structure, proper oversight from civilizations that understand the sacred responsibility of interspecies stewardship." He gestured toward the holographic container with the sort of dramatic flourish usually seen in opera performances. This coffee contamination is merely the latest example of human recklessness. Vera had stopped moving entirely, standing beside the crystal inspection table with the sort of stillness that predators might recognize as a prelude to sudden violence. Her hands rested casually at her sides, her breathing had become carefully controlled, and her green eyes held the sort of focus usually associated with targeting systems. Mental sophistication, she repeated. Precisely. The Vorthans have spent 60,000 years developing proper reverence for biological systems. We understand that true evolution requires respect for all living matter, careful consideration of ecological impact, and appropriate ceremonial acknowledgement of our place in the cosmic order. Thorvak-Ness was warming to his theme now, oblivious to the subtle shift in atmospheric tension. Humans simply consume without thought, like the primitive mammals they fundamentally remain. The inspection bay's monitoring systems began registering unusual readings from the human coordinator, though their programming had no protocols for interpreting the data. Elevated heart rate, increased muscle tension, and something that the xenobiology databases couldn't quite classify but recognized as potentially significant. For example, the Vorthan continued, now fully committed to his lecture on human inadequacy, your crude consumption of stimulants shows complete disregard for natural neurochemical balance. True civilized beings achieve alertness through meditation, proper breathing techniques, and harmonious alignment with cosmic energy flows. Cosmic energy flows. Indeed, something your species' limited neural architecture cannot comprehend. Thorvak-Ness's mandibles clicked with satisfaction as he leaned forward, placing all four hands on the crystal table's surface. This is why the collective has decided to implement enhanced oversight protocols for all human shipping operations. The crystal table between them was a masterpiece of Andromedan craftsmanship, carved from a single piece of stellar crystal and engineered to withstand anything short of a small nuclear explosion. Its surface displayed real-time molecular analyses, atmospheric readings, and artistic patterns designed to promote peaceful contemplation during bureaucratic procedures. Enhanced oversight protocols, Vera said, her voice carrying the conversational tone that made experienced customs officials start looking for emergency exits. Certainly. Beginning immediately, all human cargo will require pre-authorization from Vorthan supervisors, detailed biological analysis of any organic materials, and appropriate purification ceremonies to ensure compliance with galactic health standards. Thorvak-Ness straightened to his full height, his carapace gleaming with the confidence of someone who'd never been challenged by someone half his size. Naturally, these additional services will require appropriate processing fees. Processing fees. Of course, the collective's time and expertise in civilizing human commerce practices cannot be provided without compensation. We estimate an additional 40% surcharge on all shipping authorizations should cover the necessary administrative overhead. The inspection bay fell into the sort of silence usually reserved for moments before natural disasters or really spectacular explosions. The automated systems continued their endless monitoring cycles, but something in the environmental readings had shifted. The air itself seemed to be holding its breath. Inspector Thorvak-Ness, Vera said, tilting her head slightly in a gesture that suggested either curiosity or the sort of predatory assessment that preceded swift violence. I have just one question about this enhanced oversight situation. Certainly, Coordinator. Though I doubt your primitive cognitive framework can fully grasp the sophisticated concepts involved. Oh, I think I can manage. Her smile was the sort that made seasoned diplomats start drafting resignation letters. Here's what I'm wondering. If your species is so evolved, so mentally sophisticated, so superior to primitive humans. She paused, letting the silence stretch across geological time periods. How come you still need 40% of our money to feel important? The translation systems frantically cycled through linguistic databases, certain they'd missed some crucial diplomatic nuance. The monitoring equipment registered readings so far outside normal parameters that it began broadcasting emergency signals to station administration. Thorvak-Ness's compound eyes literally bulged from their sockets. In his species' 60,000-year history of evolutionary superiority, no one had ever questioned the fundamental righteousness of their oversight activities. The very concept was so alien that his nervous system began generating error messages. "You day," he began, his voice rising to frequencies that made the bay's crystal fixtures sing like wine glasses. "Oh, I dare lots of things," Vera replied with cheerful conversationality. "I dare to think that maybe, just maybe, drinking coffee doesn't require a philosophy degree. I dare to believe that efficiency isn't a moral failing. And I really dare to suggest that if you spent less time blessing shipping containers and more time developing actual personalities, you might not need to compensate with superiority complexes and extortion schemes." What happened next would be analyzed in xenopsychology journals for decades to come. Thorvak-Ness, driven beyond all rational thought by this unprecedented assault on Vorthan dignity, grabbed the crystal inspection table with all four arms and hefted it above his head. His intention, according to later testimony from the bay's automated recording systems, was to demonstrate the physical superiority that his species had developed alongside their mental evolution. The Andromedan crystal table, despite its advanced engineering and religious significance, was not designed for use as a blunt instrument. As Thorvak-Ness lifted it overhead, structural stress patterns appeared along its carefully crafted edges. Warning lights began flashing as the embedded monitoring systems registered catastrophic failure of their housing unit. For a moment that seemed to span several ice ages, the 8-foot-tall alien inspector stood poised above the 5'7" human coordinator, holding several hundred pounds of crystallized starlight like some sort of cosmic executioner. The bay's automated systems recorded everything in multiple dimensions, creating what would later become the most watched security footage in galactic history. Then Vera Blackwood did something that would fundamentally alter every species' understanding of human diplomatic capabilities. She stepped forward, not backward, as any sensible being would when confronted with imminent crushing death. Not sideways, as someone seeking tactical advantage might. She stepped directly forward, inside the range of the descending table, and reached up with both hands. The impact should have reduced her to a small pile of organic paste suitable for use as plant fertilizer. Instead, there was a sound like breaking glass, followed by a wet snapping noise that made everyone's digestive systems clench in sympathetic horror. When the crystalline dust settled and the emergency lighting stopped strobing, the inspection bay's recording systems captured a scene that would haunt customs officials for generations. The Andromedan crystal table lay in glittering fragments across the bay floor, its sophisticated monitoring equipment sparking and smoking. Thorvak-Ness's body twitched spasmodically near the far wall, while his head remained in Vera's hands like a particularly ugly trophy. "Hey," she said, examining the severed head with the casual interest of someone checking a shipping label. "That crystal really was as fragile as it looked." The bay's central AI immediately began broadcasting emergency protocols in 47 languages simultaneously, though none of its programming had anticipated this specific scenario. "Attention all personnel," it announced with the sort of calm that comes from having no emotional investment in the outcome. "We have an unprecedented customs incident in Bay 12 Theta. Please consult your emergency procedures and consider updating your life insurance policies." Vera looked around the destruction with mild confusion. "Unprecedented? Is that bad?" "Unprecedented customs incidents," the AI explained patiently, "are theoretical scenarios involving lethal violence during routine bureaucratic procedures. Zenith Station has never actually experienced one, as most civilized species resolve disputes through proper committee review processes." "Well," Vera said, selecting the largest piece of shattered crystal table, "congratulations on expanding your operational experience." The fragment she'd chosen was roughly triangular, about the size of a dinner plate, with edges sharp enough to cut through philosophical arguments. Its surface still displayed fragmentary holographic readings, casting rainbow patterns across the debris-strewn bay. She tested its weight and balance with the sort of professional assessment usually reserved for quality control inspections. "This has nice heft to it," she announced to the recording systems. "Mind if I keep it as a paperweight?" Before the AI could formulate an appropriate response, station security arrived with the sort of tactical precision that came from drilling for every conceivable emergency except the one they were currently facing. The response team included representatives from 8 different species, all equipped with restraint devices calibrated for maximum species compatibility, all suddenly wondering if their equipment would be adequate for whatever this situation had become. Team Commander ZYL Excorth, whose species specialized in conflict de-escalation through interpretive dance, surveyed the scene with the expression of someone whose training manual hadn't covered creative decapitation during customs inspections. The bay sensors were registering biological matter from at least 2 different species, enough structural damage to constitute a small renovation project, and residual energy readings that suggested reality itself might need counseling. "Coordinator Blackwood," he said carefully, "could you please explain the current situation?" Vera looked down at Thorvak-Ness's head, which she was still holding like an oversized paperweight. "He tried to hit me with a table. I disagreed with his approach." "And they?" Commander ZYL Excorth gestured delicately at the twitching corpse. "Oh, that. Yeah, I might have been a little more emphatic about my disagreement than strictly necessary." She shrugged apologetically. "My bad." The security team exchanged the sort of looks that suggested immediate updates to their training protocols. In their combined experience covering dozens of species and hundreds of diplomatic incidents, they'd never encountered casual dismemberment delivered with cheerful self-criticism. The commander continued, "We'll need to conduct a full investigation of this incident." "Sure thing." Vera tucked the crystal fragment under her arm like a briefcase. "Mind if I bring this back to my office? I've been needing a decent paperweight, and this one comes with such interesting history." The investigation that followed lasted 8 hours and involved representatives from 12 different species, 3 artificial intelligences, and a philosophical consultant whose job was apparently to determine whether the incident had violated any cosmic principles of appropriate behavior. Vera answered every question with helpful enthusiasm, providing detailed explanations of human reflexive responses, structural engineering principles, and the basic physics of applied leverage to vulnerable joint connections. She seemed genuinely puzzled by the investigator's shock, repeatedly pointing out that Thorvak-Ness had initiated hostilities by attempting assault with ceremonial furniture during what should have been routine customs processing. "I mean, he literally tried to brain me with a crystal table," she explained for the 7th time to a panel of increasingly bewildered xenobiologists. In human culture, that's generally considered poor customer service. Meanwhile, news of the incident spread through Zenith Station's diplomatic community with the velocity of gossip and the persistence of scandal. By shift's end, every customs office, shipping bay, and administrative center buzzed with increasingly elaborate versions of the story. The human who'd killed the Vorthan Inspector with her bare hands became the human who'd single-handedly defeated an entire customs enforcement division. The crystal table became an ancient Earth weapon of mass destruction. The economic implications became apparent within hours. Species that had previously treated human shipping requests with bureaucratic contempt suddenly discovered urgent reasons to expedite processing procedures. The Symmetrian Port Authority, traumatized by detailed reports of the incident, approved docking rights they'd been reviewing for 6 months. The Andromedan Trade Consortium fast-tracked cargo authorizations they'd been studying since the previous fiscal quarter. Within 72 hours, human freight coordinators across the galaxy reported unprecedented cooperation from customs officials who had previously considered efficiency a character defect. Processing procedures that had typically required weeks of committee review were suddenly completed in hours. Shipping routes that had been closed to human vessels reopened with welcoming messages and complementary atmospheric adjustments. The psychological impact resonated throughout the galactic bureaucracy. For millennia, the established customs authorities had maintained their power through a combination of regulatory complexity and cultural condescension. They'd treated newer species as apprentices in the grand tradition of interstellar commerce, offering guidance and processing services in exchange for deference and increasingly creative fee structures. Humans had fit this pattern perfectly, until Vera Blackwood demonstrated that evolutionary advancement might not correlate directly with survival instincts. The casual efficiency with which she neutralized a physically superior opponent suggested that humanity's primitive nature included advantages that their more sophisticated neighbors had systematically underestimated. 4 weeks after what administrative historians would eventually term the Great Customs Clarification Event, Vera returned to her regular duties in Module 7 Prime Delta, probably with a spring in her step and a new desk accessory that caught the light in fascinating ways. The crystal fragment occupied a place of honor on her workstation, mounted on a simple metal stand with a small identification plaque reading Andromedan Crystal, Customs Inspection Bay 12 Theta, Processing Fee, One Vorthan Inspector. Her first appointment of the day involved representatives from the Celestial Bureaucracy Union, a consortium that had previously treated human shipping requests with all the enthusiasm usually reserved for tax audits. They arrived 20 minutes early, bearing gifts that included exotic atmospheric fresheners and what appeared to be a ceremonial fruit basket shaped like a small spacecraft. Coordinator Blackwood, the lead negotiator, announced, his crystalline form humming with barely contained nervousness, "We've reconsidered our position regarding processing timelines for Earth sector cargo shipments." "Have you now?" Vera leaned back in her chair, the crystal fragment casting prismatic patterns across her desk. "That's interesting. Last month you said our requests were being processed according to standard galactic protocols, which apparently meant sometime before the heat death of the universe. We may have been overly cautious in our timeline estimates." The union representative's harmonic frequencies shifted toward what his species considered apologetic resonance. Upon further review, efficiency has its own elegant beauty. The negotiations that followed would have impressed veteran diplomats with their unprecedented speed and comprehensiveness. Procedures that had been points of bureaucratic pride for centuries were suddenly under review for optimization. Processing fees that had been carefully calibrated to reflect true administrative costs became subject to competitive market adjustment. Shipping schedules that had been impossible given current resource allocation transformed into challenging but achievable operational targets. As the Celestial Bureaucracy delegation departed with signed agreements and visible relief, Vera's assistant knocked on her office door. Marcus Webb had worked in interstellar logistics for 12 years, but the past month had introduced him to aspects of customs relations that weren't covered in any training manual. He said, placing a datapad carefully on her desk while avoiding direct contact with the crystal fragment. "I've got the final incident report from station administration. Let me guess, they are calling it regrettable miscommunication resulting in unfortunate administrative reorganization. Actually, they classified it as justified defensive response to unprovoked customs assault with intent to cause bodily harm using ceremonial furniture. They are also implementing new safety protocols for inspection procedures, including mandatory anger management screening for all customs officials and structural improvements to table durability standards." Vera picked up the crystal fragment and watched light refract through its faucette surface. Probably a wise policy decision. Though I have to say, the old furniture certainly made an impression. Speaking of impressions, your scheduling system has been overwhelmed with appointment requests. Every major customs authority in the galaxy wants to personally review their processing procedures with humanity. All because I had one bad day and lost my patience with a bureaucrat. All because you demonstrated that humans are capable of resolving administrative disputes through methods that don't involve extensive committee review, appeals processes, and fiscal year budget planning. Through her office windows, Zenith Station's artificial environment continued its careful simulation of cosmic harmony. Geometric gardens stretched toward calculated horizons, while shipping vessels from hundreds of worlds approached the docking bays with notably improved scheduling efficiency. The station's famous bureaucratic delays had mysteriously shortened from weeks to hours, though no one seemed quite sure why. The irony wasn't lost on Vera that her single moment of administrative impatience had accomplished more for human shipping relations than years of diplomatic courtesy and procedural compliance. For decades, humanity had tried to earn respect through careful adherence to galactic customs protocols and cultural sensitivity training. All it had taken was one pompous inspector with a superiority complex and a crystal table to reveal that sometimes respect and fear were functionally interchangeable currencies. Her next meeting involved representatives from the Vorthan Collective itself. After Thorvak-Ness's untimely administrative reorganization, they'd sent urgent communications expressing profound regrets for their inspector's inappropriate procedural methodology and their sincere desire to establish streamlined processing relationships with humanity. The enhanced oversight protocols they demanded so vigorously were now waived entirely, along with several additional bureaucratic requirements they thought humans might find unnecessarily burdensome. As she prepared for the meeting, Vera couldn't help but smile at the crystal fragment. It had become more than just a paperweight or conversation piece. It represented a fundamental shift in how the galaxy's bureaucratic establishment viewed human patience levels and their correlation with acceptable administrative outcomes. The station had spent millennia perfecting the art of bureaucratic complexity, building elaborate systems for processing disputes through committee review, regulatory analysis, and procedural refinement. They created a universe where problems were managed rather than solved, where everyone could maintain their dignity while nothing actually improved. Then a human freight coordinator had demonstrated that some administrative challenges could be resolved through the direct application of sufficient force to the appropriate anatomical pressure points. It wasn't elegant according to galactic standards, it wasn't sophisticated by bureaucratic measures, and it certainly wasn't covered in any diplomatic training protocols. But it worked with remarkable efficiency. And in a galaxy full of species that had forgotten what it meant to have genuine consequences for poor customer service, that was apparently worth its weight in crystallized administrative reform.